What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to the final game preview and prediction video for the 2024-2025 college football season and college football playoff, because the one game we have left to talk about is the national championship. Scarlet and gray versus the dark blue and gold. This is going to be a phenomenal matchup from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. The Ohio State Buckeyes were not the buzzsaw this year that a lot of people thought they were going to be. They failed to beat their rival Michigan for the fourth straight year. They failed to win the Big Ten Conference. Well, there's only one goal left. When you're at Ohio State, you beat Michigan, you win your conference, and you win the national championship. The most important one of those they can accomplish on Monday night, because even though they faltered in the regular season, they have been a buzzsaw throughout these playoffs, dismantling Tennessee, thrashing Oregon, and then beating the likes of the Texas Longhorns in the Cotton Bowl. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are an underdog story of sorts. It seems like everybody and their mother counted this team out after that loss to Northern Illinois. But this team fought through adversity, and they kept rolling and rolling and rolling. They carried that momentum into the playoffs. They beat Indiana. They beat and upset the Georgia Bulldogs without Carson Beck. And then in one of the classic playoff games of all time, Notre Dame beats Penn State on a walk-off field goal, well, almost a walk-off field goal, to send them to this point. They are competing for a national championship. No matter which team wins, it's going to be a good story either way, but one of these two head coaches is going to raise their first national championship trophy and put another trophy in the locker room of one of the most storied programs in college football history. Can't wait to break down this matchup for all you fine people, but I do want to let you know how you can support me if you would like to do so. If the only thing you do is you sit down and you watch this video, which you're already doing, you might as well finish it. I greatly appreciate that, and it helps support me in many more ways than you guys can even imagine. But if you want to help to do more to support the channel, you can hit that red subscribe button down there as well as the bell, because even though there will be no more college football games after this one takes place, we're still going to be uploading college football content. If you like that kind of stuff, you'll want to stick around here on the channel, and I want to see that support that we've got in 2024 continue into 2025. You can also like, comment, share, and anything else you do to interact with the channel. Help support what I do here on YouTube. But if you want to support me outside of YouTube, listen to games I call, read articles I write, listen or watch podcasts I do, or anything else I do in the sports media realm, Twitter or Instagram is the place for that. It's at TailgateNate29. And if you want to follow me in a more professional setting, I do have a LinkedIn page set up as well. All right. Scarlet and gray, the gold domes of Notre Dame. This is going to be a brilliant matchup from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. For the final time this season, how do we do preview predictions here on the channel? Glad you asked. We're going to take a deep dive into some keys to the game when each team possesses the football. So we will first look at this Ohio State offense against this Notre Dame defense and break that down in depth. And then we will take a look at this Notre Dame offense against this Buckeye defense, take a look at that in depth. After we do all of that, I'll break this game down even more, give you some final thoughts, some final opinions, tell you how I think this game is going to go, as well as give you who I think is going to raise the national championship trophy. If it's worth any consolation, I have not missed a pick in my college football playoff bracket so far. So with all of that being said, already about 4 minutes into the video here, let's dive on in and talk about the 2024-2025 college football playoff national championship. All right, so as I said a little bit ago, we are going to start with previewing this Ohio State offense. Now, throughout the course of the season, it's been a pretty solid offense that's got a ton of dynamic weapons. And when you talk about Ohio State in this playoffs, Will Howard has played at a different level. Besides that Texas game, Jeremiah Smith has been absolutely otherworldly. And we'll talk about how Texas really shut him down a little bit later. But, I mean, you could list off the amount of weapons that Ohio State has and still not be done. It would take me forever to list all the weapons they have. But I'm going to try to do some here. Travion Henderson, Quinshaw Judkins. That's in the running back room, by the way. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, G. Scott. And they got so many more guys waiting in the wings there. And Will Howard, who has been the driver of this team, has played some of his best football down the stretch of the season in the college football playoff. Now, you also have to talk about this offensive line that lost its starting center, that lost the starting tackle in Josh Simmons, and to a lot of people, they're kind of putting together a makeshift offensive line. Well, that makeshift offensive line has gone gap heavy with the run game, has done great in pass protection, and has been phenomenal throughout the course of the college football playoff. When you take a look at this Fighting Irish defense, I think some people don't really give this Irish defense the credit that they deserve or the coverage that they deserve, especially in the back end of that defense, because this secondary is absolutely flawless. Now, they do play a lot of man coverage, and I'll tell you why that might be a problem here a little bit later. But this is a Notre Dame team that is going to trust their guys against your guys 10 times out of 10. They love to play man coverage. They play it at one of the highest rates in the entire country. But they also have a killer pass rush that can get home. They are great on third downs. They're one of the best third down defenses in the entire country. While Ohio State isn't necessarily great on third downs offensively, they've been pretty effective here throughout the college football playoff. This is a Notre Dame defense that I think playing man is going to scare a lot of people, because you saw what happened when Tennessee decided to play man. You throw it up to number 4 in Scarlett, and he's going to be able to come down with it. You throw it up to number 2. He makes some phenomenal catches. But Notre Dame, I think, has a more aggressive style of man coverage that could bode well for them against Ohio State. Now, the reason, again, I'll say that it scares some people, because you saw when Tennessee, I'm repeating myself now, so forgive me, but when Tennessee played man, they threw it up, and Tennessee couldn't play the style of defense they wanted to. Oregon failed to play man against this team. Now, what Texas did is they played a lot of zone, specifically trying to hound in and corral Jeremiah Smith. They had 2 or 3 guys, as well as the Thorpe Award winner Jahdae Barron, bracketing him, which made it impossible to try to get the ball to number 4. He only had 1 catch for 3 yards in that college football playoff semifinal game, and it was because Texas took him away. Even when Will Howard tried to force the football into him, when he was like, okay, Jeremiah is open, Texas did some things disguising coverage and disguising some players that forced Will Howard to throw a pick. Notre Dame is going to do the exact same thing. They are the best turnover defense in the entire country, and much like the Texas Longhorns, they're going to do a lot of things within their scheme to get you to turn the football over. You're going to make a throw that you wish you're going to have back. You're going to put the ball on the ground because Notre Dame is going to get hat to ball, or they're going to get fist to ball. It's a very aggressive Notre Dame defense. It flies all over the field, but this is an Ohio State offense that, apart from some points throughout that Texas game where the Texas defense really did shut them down, they only allowed Ohio State offensively, really, you take away that 75-yard screen pass at the end of the first half, and of course that Jack Sawyer scoop and score touchdown, they only allowed the Ohio State offense to 14 points. Now, in reality, it was 21, because you have to include that 75-yard screen pass that Travion Henderson housed at the end of that first half. But Notre Dame has got to have a game plan here where they win this game by their defense holding Ohio State to fewer than 20 points. It just has to happen, because I think Will Howard and this Ohio State offense are a little bit too dynamic for Notre Dame to handle. Now, let's dive on into some of the keys here. Best on best is going to happen, and quite possibly, this could be the matchup that determines how this game goes. It's the OSU wideouts versus the Fighting Irish defensive backs. I wonder how much man coverage Notre Dame is going to play. Fast forward down there to the third bullet point, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But the wideouts versus the defense, the wideouts, not wideouts, wideouts, the wide receivers for Ohio State. I've listed them all off previously, but Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, maybe even Brandon Innes shows up, and the tight end G. Scott versus this amazing Irish secondary that has been without Benjamin Morrison most of this season and has still performed phenomenally, and Xavier Watts is one of the best defensive backs in the entire country. Christian Gray, of course, made that interception against Penn State to spark Notre Dame and to help them go and win that game towards the end of that contest. That is going to be the matchup, more likely than not, that decides this game. And I know trench play is important and quarterback play is important. If Notre Dame can lock down these Ohio State wide receivers by playing man coverage, that's going to be troublesome for the Buckeyes. But this Irish defense. All you got to do is get pressure fast. And when you talk about the run game, because yes, defending this Ohio State pass is really, really tricky. Defending their run is also really hard because with this makeshift offensive line that Ohio State has gone to, I put that in quotes just because it's what people are calling him, what people are calling it, not necessarily what I'm calling it, but again, they have moved to more of a gap heavy scheme. They are opening gaps for these running backs to run through, not so much power and let the running backs try to bob and weave their way. They are parting the Red Sea. I think they're running gap schemes like 60% of the time, maybe 65, if not even higher than that. And no one has really been able to stop it. Yes, people have been able to slow it down, but Travion Henderson has ripped off big runs and the big screen pass. Quinshawn Judkins has ripped off some big runs too, and he's used his power to motor his way into the end zone. He did that twice against Texas. So this is the run defense that I think is going to be pretty hard for Notre Dame to stop as well. But if they can get pressure fast, if they can close those gaps, and they're going to have some linebackers blitzing and maybe even Xavier Watts or a couple other safeties or corners reading plays, getting into the gaps, not allowing Ohio State to get that run game going, that's going to help them defend the pass even better. Now, I said I'd talk about it here in a little bit. It's time for that. How much man coverage is Notre Dame going to play? They play man at one of the highest rates of any team across the entire country. Ohio State's trust their guys in man coverage, obviously. Jeremiah Smith dared Oregon to play man, and Oregon got burned. Notre Dame is going to trust their guys in their system, but you also have it on film now. Texas put it on film on how to beat Jeremiah Smith, and it was bracketing him with 3 different guys in zone coverage. I think Notre Dame is going to mix in a little bit more zone here, but I think they're still going to play a heavy, heavy dose of man. I couldn't tell you how much man Notre Dame is going to play. I don't have any insight. I'm not a coach. I've never been a player. I'm not inside of that locker room. But I do know that now Notre Dame has seen film, but they also trust their guys. I think they're going to mix it up. I think they're going to play a little bit of both. I couldn't tell you which one they're going to play more. I think that's going to remain to be seen on Monday night, and I can't wait to see how that matchup specifically between the Irish defensive backs and the Buckeyes wideouts unfold, because as I said earlier, I think that very well could be the matchup that decides who wins this game. Now let's go ahead and move on here and talk about the Notre Dame offense against the Buckeye defense. So I mentioned how Will Howard has been playing some grade A football lately. Well, so has Riley Leonard. He made some big plays at the end of that Georgia game. Late in the Penn State game, made some phenomenal throws, and Jaden Greathouse really stepped himself up. Notre Dame, much like Ohio State, has got some issues on the offensive line. And we kind of talked about this a little bit with Texas, how they had some injuries and issues with their offensive line. They had allowed way too many sacks because the pressure was getting home. And this Buckeye team has found something in their pass rush where they've been able to exploit really anything an offensive line is thrown at them. More on that in just a second. Let's get back to this Irish offense. Their run game is absolutely lethal. When it is on, it is dangerous. Now, it has a little bit of a hiccup right now because Jeremiah Love is not necessarily 100%, and you kind of wonder, how 100% is he going to be? Well, he had a couple rules for himself during that Penn State game. No hurdling was the big one I heard, and there were probably some other coaching decisions that say, hey, let's limit you a little bit because if we win this game, we're really going to need you for the national championship. Yeah, he broke that no hurdle rule. His jump cutting ability, the ability for a running back to jump cut's probably the most important thing that they can have, was, I think, a little bit limited, but not as limited as I thought it was going to be. And he's got so much time to heal up here. I think Jeremiah Love is going to be ready to go here. I think he is going to be a huge, huge piece for this Irish team. However, there is a problem with this Irish run game, and it is the fact that if you take away that 98-yard touchdown run that Jeremiah Love had against Indiana in the first round of the college football playoff, throughout these playoffs, Notre Dame running backs are only averaging, I think it's 3.4, maybe 3.3, if not a little bit lower, yards per carry, which is not a good number. They got to work on getting more efficient, and that's actually the first bullet point that I put here, because no one's been able to solve this Buckeye run defense. Texas was the sort of case study that you could look at and say, okay, if anyone's going to run the football, it's going to be Texas, because Tennessee was out of the game early and Dylan Sampson didn't play, so they passed the football a whole lot more than they ran it. Oregon was out of the game early and Jordan James got hurt, and even when Jordan James was playing, he was ripping off some pretty sizable runs. Texas was the case study because Jaden Blue didn't get hurt. Quintravian Wisner didn't get hurt. They played healthy the entire game. Texas stayed with the run game. They stayed committed, and they could only muster about 50 yards. I think they only averaged barely over 2 yards per carry. Now, sack yardage is included in that, I understand, but still, no one has been able to solve this Buckeye run defense, and Notre Dame ripping off 3.3 yards per carry against a team that only allows you to go not even 90 yards per game. That's going to be very troublesome. Notre Dame has got to find something. They've got to find ways to exploit this Ohio State run defense. I wanted to talk about that key first because it's just something that's easily noticeable. But let's talk about Riley Leonard for a second. I think this is a very underrated quarterback matchup in the national championship. I think Will Howard is an absolute baller, and I think Riley Leonard is an absolute baller. I talked about how Will Howard is playing some grade A football. So is Riley Leonard. Now, Riley Leonard, Will Howard can run, and we saw that against Texas. I mean, if he doesn't trip, that's probably a house call on that 4th and 2 play. But Riley Leonard's ability to get outside of the pocket and extend plays is second to none. And I talked about it in my last video, or in my last preview video when Notre Dame played Penn State. But this is a quarterback in Riley Leonard that makes one read, maybe his second read, boom, and then he takes off and he's gone. He is running his butt towards the sideline, getting in open space, creating a big play for his offense if his first or second read isn't there. What Ohio State has got to do here is they have got to force Riley Leonard to sit in that pocket, and they have to be able to contain him. That's all part of containing this Notre Dame run offense, because yes, you have Jeremiah Love to worry about, and then you also have Jadarian Price, who averages more yards per carry. But again, I said as a whole, the Notre Dame run game has not been super efficient. They've got to find something in their efficiency to try to solve this Buckeye run defense that has let nobody do anything in the college football playoff. Now, again, you factor in Jeremiah Love, you factor in Jadarian Price. Riley Leonard is the X factor. I don't care what anyone says. In my opinion, Riley Leonard is the X factor to this Notre Dame run game. No one has been able to contain him so far. Let's actually go ahead. I haven't said many stats throughout this video. Let's take a look at what Riley Leonard has done on the ground for Notre Dame in the 3 college football playoff games. In that first game, 11 carries, 30 yards, did have a rushing touchdown. Really not a whole lot special there. In the game against Georgia, 14 carries for 80 yards, including a couple huge plays, ripped off a 32-yard run, dove to get some huge first downs in the late stages of that game. And then the game against Penn State, 18 carries for 35 yards, 1 touchdown, didn't have a carry longer than 6. But again, a lot of those, if you go back and watch the film, were massive plays for this Notre Dame team. Now, again, you want to talk about how this Notre Dame run game has struggled overall. Only 2.8 yards per carry against Penn State, who maybe besides Georgia, I guess statistically speaking, Penn State has been the best run defense they have seen all throughout the college football playoff. Ohio State now is going to be the best run defense that Notre Dame has seen all season long, and it might very well be one of, if not the best run defense in the entire country. And Notre Dame also struggled to get it going on the ground against Indiana. That run defense that I think statistically is tops in the country right now was able to not necessarily shut them down in full, because again, there was that 98-yard run, but they were able to limit them as best as they possibly could. Now, here's where I think you can look at another matchup position by position, and you can look at it and say, wow, this is a matchup that might decide the game. Much like Ohio State's wide receivers versus Notre Dame's defensive backs, I think the Irish tackles, the offensive linemen on the outside of that offensive line versus the Buckeyes edge rushers. That's JTT, that's Jack Sawyer, that's any other guy that they want to put out there. Even if you bring someone off a blitz, Cody Simon, you want to bring Sonny Styles, sure, why not? This is a Buckeye team that blitzes fairly often. They're not necessarily like one of the highest blitz rates across the entire country or anything like that, but Jim Knowles for the most part, has been very smart about when he is bringing his blitzes. But Ohio State has thrived in these playoffs on their back end, on their secondary, making opposing quarterbacks go, what the actual hell am I looking at? They did that with Nico, who's a very good quarterback, but albeit young. Okay, you can kind of cut him slack. They did that with Dylan Gabriel. A lot of those were what people like to call coverage sacks, where you get some really, really good coverage. The quarterback has nowhere to go. They contain him in the pocket really well. And eventually, it's going to lead to a sack if the quarterback just doesn't throw the football away and he can't, if he's in the pocket, because that would be intentional grounding, right? So, the way that this, and they even did that with Quinn Ewers too. Now, Quinn Ewers still made some pretty solid throws, had himself still a pretty solid day, but there were moments still where this Buckeye defense made Quinn Ewers go, I have no idea how to read this. Now, that is why Riley Leonard, the one read, two read, boom, and he's gone, is dangerous. I think Ohio State at moments is going to need to put a linebacker spy. Maybe it's Cody Simon, maybe it's Sonny Styles. You got to put someone to watch Riley Leonard at all times, because if he escapes from that pocket, A, the coverage sack is not going to happen, and then B, you're risking a dynamic open field runner in Riley Leonard get loose, right? But the Notre Dame containing and maybe even pushing aside and extending the pocket for Riley Leonard, trying to defend Jack Sawyer, JTT, that's going to be huge. Their offensive line has had injuries this year as well, as much as Ohio State's has. But two things that I think are huge in the Buckeyes' favor here that Notre Dame is going to have to combat is pressure. And again, it just sort of pressure and scheming, and they go together, right? Because the scheming in the back end, and Jim Knowles said it in a press conference that they had played some coverages, especially on that goal line stand, which led to the eventual historic, amazing play where Jack Sawyer took that thing, 83 yards to the house. There were some coverages and some schemes that Jim Knowles says, yeah, we've never used that before, but we're going to be using it again because it worked. And again, it was especially referring to that goal line stand. I think Ohio State's going to play some coverages here that's going to make Riley Leonard go, I don't know how to solve this. And Notre Dame, I think, has a very underrated group of wide receivers. Bo Collins, Jaden Greathouse, so many more guys. They are an underrated group. Mitchell Evans, Jordan Faison, and even some of the other guys that you're going to see throughout there, they can be dynamic. But against this Buckeyes secondary and Riley Leonard getting them the ball through this pass rush, that is going to be the key here. And again, that is going to rely on the tackles, the outside offensive linemen, to be able to slow down the Buckeyes getting some pressure home. All right, we've previewed this matchup here. Let me tell you how I think this one is going to play down. First off, I just want to say a lot of people are looking at that Ohio State 8.5-point line. Some people may be saying it's too high. I've heard others saying it's too low. I think it is a little bit too high, and I'll explain why here in just a little bit. Over under 46.5, they are expecting a pretty defensive game. Notre Dame's defense has been great throughout the college football playoff. Yeah, they had a couple lapses against Penn State, but they held Indiana to really only 3 points. They scored 17 points when it didn't really, I should say they scored 14 points towards the end of the game when it didn't really matter. They held Georgia to only 10 points. Now, without the starting quarterback, things of that nature, right? Notre Dame had a very hard time slowing down the run of Penn State. I think they could have a hard time slowing down the run of Ohio State. Notre Dame has a shot here to win this game. I really think they do. I've been giving Notre Dame their flowers. I think a lot of people have sort of counted them out and still doubted them even throughout the college football playoff. I know some buddies of mine and even some other content creators that are like, oh yeah, I've predicted my bracket right. Oh, except for Notre Dame. I thought they were going to lose to Georgia. And I thought they were going to lose to Penn State. Hell, some even thought they were going to lose to Indiana. It's a team that has still been continued to be doubted, and seeing that underdog line, I think they're going to feed on that, and I think they're going to make this a really competitive game, because I do think some of that pressure will get home, and I think Notre Dame, when they play man coverage, are going to win some of those one-on-one battles. But Will Howard, throughout most part in the college football playoff, besides that one throw that he tried to force into Jeremiah Smith, has done a great job at limiting the turnovers. And this Buckeye offense has done a great job at being able to limit turnovers and pressure. To me, if Notre Dame plays man coverage, which I don't think they're going to go completely away from, there are going to be some moments where Jeremiah Smith is going to be one-on-one with a Christian Gray or any of the other Notre Dame defensive backs. Jeremiah Smith is going to win that matchup more often than not. And I know Notre Dame trusts their guys. I trust Jeremiah Smith a little bit more. I trust Emeka Egbuka a little bit more. I think Notre Dame's going to have a hard time slowing down this Ohio. Well, they're going to have a hard time stopping. I think they'll be able to slow it down. They're going to have a hard time stopping this Ohio State run game. And Notre Dame has got to have a plan where they win by Notre Dame scoring less than 20 points, because I don't think they are going to eclipse that margin. The only way that Oregon did is because Ohio State really sat themselves out. They had that late drive there to make things a little bit closer on the scoreboard front. This is a Notre Dame team that's going to fight and that's going to compete. And Riley Leonard is a gamer, man. I think they're going to make this game really, really close. I think the Buckeye secondary is way too good. I think the Buckeye defense as a whole is a little bit too good. Will Howard is playing to his best football. They got so many weapons, and this is the Ohio State team that we have been waiting to see all season long, that we wanted to see all regular season long. We're getting it now in the college football playoff, and when the Buckeyes are at their height and are playing to their ceiling, no one can stop them. Notre Dame is going to do some things in coverage to try to force Will Howard to throw some picks. I think they're going to have their good moments. But in order for Notre Dame to win this game, they got to run the football well, which no one has been able to do against this Buckeye team. And I think they have to be +2 in turnover margin. If not both of those things don't happen, I think Notre Dame goes down with a loss. And I think any one of them is a tough ask against this Buckeye team. Ohio State's your national champion to me. I said it ever since that Tennessee, that Oregon game, that if they play like they had been playing for 180, 120 more minutes, now they got 60 more minutes, they're going to go ahead and win this entire damn thing. I think Ohio State's going to do it. 24-17. The defense makes some huge plays. I think they're going to be able to contain this wide receiver group. I don't think Notre Dame's going to be able to solve this Buckeye run defense. I got Ohio State winning the national championship 24-17, and Ryan Day hosts a college football playoff trophy and maybe kills any narrative going on about him. But for Notre Dame, hell of a run, hell of a season. Marcus Freeman's done a phenomenal job. This is just the way I think this game is going to play out. That's going to do it for preview predictions here. Let's see if I am right, and let's see if my college football playoff bracket finishes out perfect. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please don't forget to support me, support the channel in any way that you would like to. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder, and we'll see all you guys in the next video. Hopefully, you'll get one, maybe two more here coming out before the national championship game. Goodbye.